All eyes are on Jack Plummer in Louisville's season opener against Georgia Tech on Friday. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're discussing the three key players to watch for the Cardinals on offense against the Yellow Jackets. So with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. As I mentioned, today's episode all about identifying and discussing the three key offensive players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals in the season opener against Georgia Tech in the Flat kickoff game. Getting closer, Friday evening, 7:30 kickoff at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So the three, if you can't tell on the right, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can obviously tell. But if you're listening to this, the three key players, Jack Plummer, Jawhar Jordan, and Josh Lifson. All eyes are on Jack Plummer. This is no surprise. Now, if you are a new fan of the show, if this is your first football season following the show, welcome aboard. I appreciate you all for joining the viewership. But if this isn't your first rodeo, if you have been following the show for at least one football season before this, or even the 2021 inaugural Locked On Louisville podcast season, then you know that when we talk about key players to watch, that I'm pretty hesitant to talk about quarterbacks because, look, I think it's cliche. Obviously, the quarterback is a key player to watch for any team. However, I'm going to talk about the quarterback on this particular episode because, well, when is the last time that Louisville has had a new QB1 that wasn't caused by injuries? So, not speaking on Brock Doman or Evan Conley or Juwan Pass or Malik Cunningham. But when is the last time that Louisville had a true QB1? Well, Lamar Jackson, 2017. That turned into Juwan Pass / Malik Cunningham, and then Malik Cunningham didn't give that job up from 2019 on. So this is the first time in a handful of seasons that Louisville has brought out a new signal caller to be the new QB1. So when I look at this game in particular, excuse me, look, there is a lot of excitement regarding Jack Plummer. I think that you look at what he did last year at California, pretty respectable. 3,095 yards to go along with 21 touchdowns and 9 interceptions in Berkeley. He completed 62.5% of his passes, but definitely his breakout season. Before that, he did not have a season to where he threw over 1,700 yards. So this was a breakout season for him, transferring in from Purdue, losing that starting job to Aiden O'Connell. You know, Plummer dealt with injuries in his stint at Purdue. He transfers to California to get a chance to be the starting quarterback, and he has a breakout season. Now, granted, one thing that you can focus on for California is he was sort of working with a patchwork offensive line in his stop at California, but also, you know, I mean, just looking at what California did, not necessarily the greatest season. However, when he played the big teams, he played pretty solidly. I mean, you look, last game of the year, 294 yards and 4 touchdowns against UCLA. He had 406 yards and 3 touchdowns against USC and 3 touchdowns against Washington. So despite them only winning a handful of games last year, this was still a pretty solid campaign for Plummer. And that's something that I feel like no doubt Jeff Brohm, when looking for his quarterback in the transfer portal, says, okay, Plummer had a good season. He knows my system. why not go out and get a graduate transfer that can quarterback my team for a season? Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting. Obviously, I am in the group that is not going to question any decision regarding quarterbacks when it comes from Jeff and Brian Brohm, because obviously those guys know what they're doing. They've been able to turn quarterbacks that weren't highly rated coming out of high school into very, very solid collegiate quarterbacks. And if Brohm and company look at Jack Plummer and say, you know what, he can be our quarterback in 2023, and we feel comfortable with what he can bring to this offense, then who are we to assume otherwise? I mean, obviously you're in wait and see approach. That is something you definitely have to keep in mind. However, to play the devil's advocate, there is a lot of responsibility riding on Plummer's shoulders. Now, this offense is obviously very talented from a skill position standpoint. Offensive line wise, Brohm did a great job of addressing those needs post spring game. And outside of tight end, which I'm not even sure if tight end is a true weakness as much as it is just a lack of inexperience at this point, because there's a lot of talent on that or in that position group, but you still have to play the games. There's not really a weakness for this Louisville offense. I mean, you have one of the best wide receiving cores that you've had in the past couple seasons. Your running back committee is very, very solid, led by Jawhar Jordan, but you also have Maurice Turner and Isaac Garendo. And then not to mention your offensive line, Michael Gonzalez, Brian Hudson, Renato Brown, transfers, Eric Miller, Willie Tyler, John Paul Flores. The list goes on. There are a ton of key guys on this offensive line, both returning and coming in, veteran-led guys up front in the trenches. So the only thing that is left to assume, or the only thing that's left to assess, is quarterback play. And it doesn't matter if you have the best skill players in the country, the best offensive line players in the country. If your quarterback struggles, that definitely hinders the ceiling for your offense and it lowers the floor. So, and in no way am I saying that Plummer's going to come in and struggle, but game one of a new era, there is a lot of excitement. There hasn't been this much excitement in over 5 years for this program. It's all going to depend on how Louisville plays on the field on Friday evening. I think that the player that everyone is going to be watching for, both due to the situation of this being an electric offense, and number two, Cardinal fans are used to Malik Cunningham. This is a fan base that has not seen a new permanent QB1 since essentially 2017, when the best player in program history finished his Louisville career. 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22 all featured a variation of Malik Cunningham and Jawan Pass / Evan Conley / Brock Doman, and I guess you could say / Jordan Travis within some respect in 2018. But this is a new feeling for Cardinals fans. We've seen the same quarterback be the starting quarterback for Louisville, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is the reality that we're living in, to where there are high expectations, because it seems like the expectations are differentiating. The national media isn't as high on Jack Plummer as the local media and Louisville fans. That's probably something that's understandable in its own sense, but the national media has sort of put Jack Plummer in the middle of the pack as it relates to the ACC quarterback hierarchy. I think that he's a little bit higher than that. I think that there's definitely potential for him to be a top 5 quarterback in the conference, which is saying a lot considering how good the quarterbacks are in the Atlantic Coast Conference. But I look at what he did at California. I look at how well he did with the offensive line play with the Golden Bears. I think that the way that he was able to sort of navigate that and still be able to produce, I like his overall toughness. I think that this is going to be the best team on paper all across the board that he has played with in his college career. He knows this system. He's been in this system for multiple years. So I don't necessarily think that there's going to be a learning curve. giving him the opportunity to go out there and have a solid effort week 1 against Georgia Tech. I think all eyes are going to be on him. I'm not saying that if he has a lackluster game that, there is, room for him to be replaced, but in the same respect, it will beg the question, if he does have a poor game week 1, well, how long of a leash is Brohm going to give Plummer before he turns to guys like Pierce Clarkson, Brock Doman, Brady Allen, Evan Conley, Harrison Bailey, etc. But you hope that's not the case. You want Plummer to be QB1 for the entirety of the season for good reasons. So all eyes are on Jack Plummer in his Louisville debut, in Jeff Brohm's debut on September 1st, 7:30 at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But not done with the offense yet. We've got a couple more segments to talk about players on offense that are going to be severely focused on. Look, this is Jawhar Jordan's time to shine in the Louisville backfield. And we will talk about what this game could mean for the Louisville running back here momentarily, after we talk about our friends over at Betterhelp. This show is sponsored by Betterhelp. Look, life has gotten tough, or life has really always been tough. The pandemic has made things even tougher. Mental health has definitely dwindled, I feel like, worldwide, post-pandemic, as we deal with different issues. Whether you're dealing with decisions surrounding your career, relationships, or anything else, therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life, so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. I started therapy back in 2021 to improve my mental health, and it has done wonders. Whether or not you've been in therapy personally, you at least know that the benefits of it are potentially still there. If you're thinking of starting, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to fit your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnCollege to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnCollege. Heading into the second segment of the show, we're discussing the 3 key offensive players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals in the season opener against Georgia Tech. All eyes are on Jack Plummer, but do not be mistaken, this is also Jawhar Jordan's time to shine. I have been a huge advocate for Jawhar Jordan over the past 12 months, especially in the offseason. You're talking about a player that now is the feature back for the Louisville Cardinals. Now, he's going to have to split carries with Maurice Turner, with Isaac Garindo. He's not going to be the only running back on the team that sees production, but he's going to be the main one, which for the past 2 seasons, we couldn't be saying that. 2021, he entered the program late in August, had to play behind a handful of running backs, got some opportunities in the latter part of the year, but still didn't have a ton of opportunity to prove himself. And that was still the case in 2022, because Louisville got a transfer commitment from Tennessee's Tyon Evans. He was the starting running back last year. He dealt with some injuries, especially at the end of the year. Travion Cooley had some solid performances to begin the year. He wasn't necessarily getting opportunities at the end of the year either. Jalen Mitchell, the veteran running back, he also was a player that was ahead of Jawhar Jordan on the depth chart preseason, but dealt with injuries almost all year long. And Jawhar Jordan's number was called in the back half of the season, and he absolutely balled out. This is something that we've talked about. He ended up with 814 yards for 4 touchdowns, averaged 5.7 yards per carry. And since he started getting the bulk of the carries in that James Madison game forward, 17 for 117 against James Madison. The past 5 games of the season, he rushed for over 100 yards. The only game that he didn't was an 11-carry, 73-yard effort against Clemson. Very solid defensive front there, but he had 117 against James Madison, 105 against NC State with a touchdown, 145 against Kentucky, 9 carries, 115 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the Wasabi Fenway Bowl against Cincinnati. So when his number was called, Jawhar Jordan obviously answered the bell. And that's something that makes me feel good about this upcoming season. But we talked about Tyon Evans, Jalen Mitchell, Travion Cooley. None of those 3 guys are playing for Louisville this season. Hell, Louisville's playing against one of these guys. Week 1, Travion Cooley plays for Georgia Tech. He's the second Cardinals running back in the past 5 years to transfer to the Yellow Jackets program, beginning with Hassan Hall. But Jawhar Jordan is now going to be the feature back for Louisville, the 5'10 native of Long Island, New York. I think this is a money year for Jordan. If you listen to the show yesterday, if you've listened at any time in the offseason, I've said it a million times. I think this is a 1,000-yard season for Jawhar Jordan. Granted, you have to also understand that Louisville's going to be passing the ball more than they have in previous years. Maurice Turner is going to play a role in this offense. Isaac Garindo, the transfer from Wisconsin, is also going to play a role in this offense. So he's going to have to make the most out of his opportunities. I could see him playing more of a role in the passing game as well. But that is my hot take, that he is a 1,000-yard rusher for the Cardinals program. So week 1, all eyes are on Jack Plummer, like I said. But Jawhar Jordan may be the star of the offense week 1, because you look at Georgia Tech last season defensively, and I understand it's pretty dangerous to talk about last year's team to preview this year's team because there's moving parts. Hell, there was a head coaching change. The team brought in some players, but Georgia Tech lost Keon White. They lost their top 2 linebackers. Now they brought in Andrew White from A&M. They brought in Braylon Oliver from Minnesota. Not the Braylon Oliver that Louisville fans know. He's still at Syracuse, but the Braylon Oliver from Minnesota had 33 tackles for the Gophers last year. Bottom 4 in the conference in total defense. The worst team in the ACC in defending the rush last season. Does that fully matter this season? Honestly, not really. Like I said, it's a dangerous rhetoric to assume that last year is going to be a direct preview of this season. But I think that you can at least draw some parallels. There's going to be a lot of focus for Georgia Tech on improving that rushing defense because their strength is in the secondary. Jackson Caudell, publisher of Sports Illustrated Georgia Tech site, All Yellow Jackets, he essentially said that, you're not necessarily worried too much about the secondary unless the Georgia Tech pass rush is not able to get home on Jack Plummer. But I think another thing is that if Georgia Tech is giving up the run in big increments where they're giving up at least 5 yards a carry, then I think that it also puts the Yellow Jackets secondary in a bad situation. So at the end of the day, I think Jawhar Jordan is going to have a big day on the ground for Louisville, both running the football and potentially as a receiver out of the backfield. I think that this is his season to shine. That's tough to say, season to shine. Say that 4 times fast. It's going to kick off with I think, favorable matchup against Georgia Tech. I think that the Yellow Jackets have some solid pieces back returning on the interior of that defensive line, but new linebackers for this group. We're going to see how Thacker's defense can get a little bit better in that game against Louisville. However, one thing that can't be overlooked is how well the Georgia Tech defense improved under Brent Key when he took over as the interim coach last year for Tech when Jeff Collins left. So something to focus on. But for me, I think that this is a big-time opportunity for Jawhar Jordan as well. Another player that is looking to leave his mark in a different way, is Josh Lifson. Lifson has not played a ton for the Cardinals, has one catch in his 2022 campaign and his 2021 campaign, but this is a possible breakout season for him. And we'll talk about what this game gives him in terms of opportunity here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. The NFL season is getting close. Get ready with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet those $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel because there are no better offers across the sports betting landscape than what you are seeing right now. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Okay, heading on into the final segment of the show. We are continuing on along, discussing now our third key offensive player for the Louisville Cardinals in the Aflac kickoff game against Georgia Tech. 7:30 kickoff on Friday in Mercedes-Benz Stadium down in the 404 Atlanta, Georgia. Final player for me, Josh Lifson. This is a possible breakout season for the tight end. The tight end position is up in the air at the moment. There is a lack of experience between Lifson, transition tight end Joey Gatewood, and true freshman tight end Jamari Johnson, also underclassman Nate Kariski as well. So there have been some moving parts. Des Melton, Francis Sherman go elsewhere. But I think that this is an opportunity for the Cardinals to have big-time play out of the tight end position. I think that Josh Lifson is going to be the starter week 1. Will he be the starter by the middle of the season? Who knows? I think Jamari Johnson is going to give him a run for his money. Potentially Joey Gatewood as well. We're going to see multiple tight end sets for this offense, but I think week 1 against Georgia Tech, Josh Lifson is going to get the call. And this is a feel-good story. Native of Louisville, Kentucky, went to Wofford out of Kentucky Country Day, KCD for short. The 6'3", 235-pound native of the Derby City transferred back to Louisville after a couple of years with Wofford College, had 1 reception in 2021 for 28 yards. He recorded his first touchdown in 2022 with a 9-yard touchdown catch against Pittsburgh. But outside of that, there has been a very minimal production level for Lifson, but he had a good spring, had a good summer, has caught touchdown passes from Jack Plummer in the offseason, a player that has built that camaraderie, built that chemistry with the Cardinals' new quarterback in the offseason. I think you're going to be looking for him to be a solid part of blocking. I think that's one reason why I think he's going to be a starter right away. But also I think that there is some upside as a pass catcher as well. With all of the extreme level skill players on the team, with the running backs that Louisville has, I think that this is going to give Lifson some possible solid matchups within this Georgia Tech defense to be able to have a solid game to where you look up in the fourth quarter and you say, dang, Josh Lifson didn't have a bad game. He had a pretty solid game. I think that that's the opportunity at hand. I could see Lifson potentially being a security blanket for Plummer. It seems like the tight end has sort of provided that security blanket for quarterbacks in Jeff Brohm's offense. So I'm interested to see what he's going to be able to do this season. But right away, I think that we're going to be able to get a look at what Lifson can do. And I'm hoping that he turns the opportunity into a solid performance against Georgia Tech. I think that he's going to be the starter right away and play the majority of the snaps week 1. You're probably going to see Joey Gatewood and Jamari Johnson in situationally throughout the entirety of the game, but I would be surprised if Lifson didn't possess and command the majority of the snaps for the Cardinals at that position. here in a couple days. So that's I kind of went back and forth between Lifson and Jamari Johnson here, but I think that Lifson is going to be the main guy for Louisville at tight end. So for me, I'm going to go with the starter here, especially for a guy that's inexperienced, looking to carve out his role, looking to have a breakout season and make a name for himself. I think that you're in the best offense to do so, and I'm interested to see how Lifson performs, how Jawhar Jordan performs, and obviously, like we mentioned, all eyes are on Jack Plummer. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. That's going to conclude today's episode of the show. Be sure to stay tuned tomorrow where we talk about the 3 defensive players to watch for the Cardinals ahead of the season opener against Georgia Tech. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.